put it in the films like this, which I put all my money into this one. I really was fascinated the way he was telling me the story. John Carpenter came and he was telling me the story in 15 minutes without a script. I was very just captivated. I saw the images and I told him how much it will cost. He said $300,000. How long will it take you? He said 5 weeks. I said, let's go. He came a week later. He said, I need $20,000 for a name, Donald Pleasance. I said, okay. And the film was a success. It made over 30 million.
Yes.
I don't know if anybody would know what really makes it.
And it really set a trend, didn't it?
Set a trend.
Yeah,
It set a
just
trend.
one after another.
One after another, but they are all successful because the kids, they go to see it as an excuse to hug your girlfriend because of a scary scene and all this. Always an excuse to break the scene.
Yeah.
In 1978, a horror film was released that, to this day, still reigns as one of the greatest horror movies of all time. A true classic. Written by John Carpenter and Debra Hill, and will go on to spawn several sequels and even a complete reboot. Halloween was made with a budget of $320,000 and would come in to gross $47 million at the US box office, and in 2008, takings that would be the equivalent of $150 million, making Halloween one of the most successful independent films of all time. Halloween stands as a landmark for the horror genre. Rob Zombie, who offered his own spin on the franchise, twice in fact, told Movie Maker, John Carpenter basically reinvented the wheel. Of course, any reinvention requires ingenuity, patience and craft. Carpenter learned his craft at the University of Southern California's film school. By the year of 1970, Carpenter got his foot in the industry after co-writing, editing and scoring John Longnecker's The Resurrection of Bronco Billy, which went on to win an Oscar in 1971 for the best live action short film. This would lead to Carpenter's 1973 debut, Dark Star. Irwin Yablans, who founded the company Compass International Films and served as its president, seen Assault on Precinct 13 and felt that Carpenter was the perfect choice to helm the company's debut film. Yablans' idea revolved around babysitters being stalked at night, and when Carpenter and his late co-writer and producer Debra Hill began writing, Yablans suggested it take place on October 31st. For the setting of Halloween, Hill drew to her hometown of Haddonfield, New Jersey, which was transformed into the fictional town of Haddonfield, Illinois. And like many great horror stories, it takes place in a Bradbury-esque environment that could more or less be your neighbourhood. I wanted a Midwest, sleepy town, Hill explained. The idea of pulling off the veneer and seeing what lies beneath intrigued me. What's so interesting to me about horror movies is they take place in small towns that don't have a huge police force. You could put the story in a sleepy town, really beautiful homes, nice full trees, and it seems safe. You think nothing could go wrong there and nothing could be further from the truth. Every town has a secret. Every town has that lore of something that went terribly wrong. What inspired me was Rear Window, where you pull off the veneer and have a peek inside of the apartments. The idea of pulling off the veneer and what lies beneath has always intrigued me. Carpenter was paid $10,000 and 10% of the profits to direct and co-write Halloween, as long as he stuck to its 20-day schedule budget. Yablans agreed to give him a final cut. John also wanted his name above the title of the film, which would make his name synonymous with the cinematic terror. According to Tommy Lee Wallace, who was the editor of Halloween and who had worked with John many times for a number of his films, John was way ahead of his time. Branding is all the rage right now, and I just think John was working very hard to set himself apart and create a brand for himself. At Hill's request, Jamie Lee Curtis was cast as Laurie in what would become her feature film debut. Jamie is very much like Laurie, Hill explained. She's very introspective, very complicated, and there's so many things and so many interesting facets about Jamie, and there's a very beautiful innocence that the business still hasn't ruined. It's said that with Laurie being the good girl of the group, Carpenter and Hill unconsciously created the classic horror rule that if you have sex, you die. It was never a conscious decision, Hill said. The people who mentioned that in reviews applied their own morality to it. I thought they were being ridiculously introspective about a film that was meant to have no social statements. According to John, it wasn't my intention to make a moral point. I just hadn't thought of it. The other girls were busy with their boyfriends, they were busy with other things, and Laurie had the perception because she's not involved in anything. She's lonely, she's looking out the window. We wanted to make Laurie a strong character who is very willful and feared nothing, Hill says. Someone who is quiet yet defiant and faced the enemy. Laurie had an inner strength you didn't see on the outside. As for the role of Dr. Samuel Loomis, it's said that Carpenter originally wanted a British actor, so he reached out to Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. After they turned down the role, Irwin Yablans suggested they try and secure Donald Pleasance, and well, the rest is history. Debra even went on to say, "We liked him so much we made him president in The Escape from New York," adding, "I think because of his wonderful use of the English language, he gave extra importance to John's writing about the personification of evil." Pleasance delivers one of the most haunting moments in the film. Take the scene when he explains to Sheriff Lee Brackett why Michael must be apprehended. As for the creation of the iconic Myers mask, it was Wallace who brought that blank, pale, emotionless face into the mix. The legend has it that when Wallace picked out two masks, one was Captain Kirk mask that was spray painted white and had the eyes modified a little bit, and the other one, well, that was just a silly old clown mask. Wallace adds, "We knew we had what we needed. I think all you had to do was look at that mask and saw something is desperately wrong here, and I'm scared." Carpenter's way of opening the movie was by far one of the real examples of how Carpenter made a masterpiece. The opening scene followed Michael into the house where he committed his first act of murder. That incredible scene was made possible with a Steadicam, which was currently becoming an important tool in cinematography. "This was a new technology that we, by the seat of our pants, learned to use," said cinematographer Dean Cundy. There was nowhere to learn yet. John wanted to do something for the opening scene that took advantage of it and that would be completely new and innovative that you couldn't do with conventional camera shots. "I've always admired long tracking shots in the opening of movies," Carpenter says. "Touch of Evil immediately comes to mind, and there's one in the original Scarface. An acquaintance of mine had made a short film that was all one take, and it was really an engrossing way of moving the camera through an environment. Working with John was a revelation because suddenly here was a guy who was interested in using the camera in a creative way, drawing in the audience," Cudney says. "I thought, boy, this is just my cup of tea, where the camera is contributing and you're telling the story with visuals." Halloween introduced many tropes into the horror genre, one being the final girl, or the notion that only one girl will survive. It's said that other films that predate Halloween introduced the premise of the final girl, which is true, though Halloween did truly put it on the map. It took so long for the film to break that Carpenter didn't even know Halloween was a hit until Avco Embassy offered him a multi-picture deal as he was filming Elvis. "Low-budget horror films were dormant, slightly sleeping at the time," Carpenter says. "Halloween revived this let's go to the movies and have fun idea. Lots of screaming, lots of grabbing your dates, lots of laughter afterwards. Word of mouth just kind of grew as people saw it. It was a very limited release, so in that sense it was amazing." In addition to being a major crowd pleaser, Halloween received strong reviews from the major critics as well. Newsweek called it a superb exercise in the act of suspense, and the most frightening flick in years. While the late Chicago Sun-Times critic Roger Ebert named it an absolutely merciless thriller. Carpenter remarked on the knockoffs, telling Bret Easton Ellis, "Friday the 13th, I feel, affects me as very cynical. It's very cynical movie making. It just doesn't rise above its cheapness. I think the reason that a lot of these slasher movies came in the 80s was a lot of folks said, look at that Halloween movie. It was made for peanuts and a lot of money is made. We could make money like that." So they just started cranking them out. Most of them were awful. The original script titled The Babysitter Murders had the events take place over the space of several days. It was the budgetary decision to change the script and have everything happen on the same day. Doing this reduced the number of costume changes and locations required, and it was decided that Halloween, the scariest night of the year, was the perfect night for this to happen. Prior to the movie, a book was written by Curtis Richards and reveals more of the story behind Michael's rage. However, the book is very rare. It's said that John's iconic score for the movie manifested from a female critic's negative review. After screening the film, she claimed that it wasn't scary. At the time, there was no music in the film whatsoever. Carpenter then composed a fully improvised score in 3 days. "Halloween was a blast," adds Carpenter. "It was just a bunch of kids making a movie. We were young, we were hungry, and not yet jaded or cynical about the industry." Debra concluded, "We were kids playing in the most exciting sandbox on the planet." A couple $100,000, an innovative script, and a darkly threatening musical score, and a $2 William Shatner mask not only created a film that earned its place as a classic in cinematic history, but inspired scores of films that followed in its legacy. Halloween is a definitive piece of horror history, and its impact and legacy continues to bleed into new slasher titles each year.
Halloween got me branded as a horror director, and it set me down a career making fantasy and science fiction and horror, but hey, I got to become John Carpenter. How cool is that?